Welcome back. We're going to continue with our discussion of the Great Depression in Europe. And again, I'm going to confine my comments to Great Britain, France, and Germany. To go further would lead us into a sort of an endless morass of political and economic detail, which I don't think is necessary in a survey class like this. Political extremes. Political parties are proposing extreme solutions or answers to the difficulties of the Great Depression. The Communist Party, for instance, says that the interests of the working class can only be served by a revolutionary overthrow of the existing political, social, and economic system. There are other parties, the Social Party in Britain, the Social Democrats in Germany. They believe that working class interests are best served by working within the political system to promote egalitarian and democratic practices. And then you have the Conservatives. Conservative Party in the UK and the Catholic Centre Party in Germany argued that the middle and upper classes, their interests are best served by traditional policies that protect property and maintain order. So you can see the parties are emerging to represent distinct classes in society. And then, of course, in Germany, you also have the rise of the Nazi Party on the far right, a fascist party advocating direct action for stronger and more authoritative governments that would have the power to respond to the Great Depression. And, of course, in 1932, the Nazis will be successful. Hitler will become chancellor, I believe, in early 1933. In the UK, a response to this economic catastrophe, again, government spending is reduced as government income is reduced. There is created what's called the national government. It's comprised of a gamut political parties, conservative, labor, liberal. MPs will comprise this national government. The national government occupies a sort of middle ground between political extremes. It abandons the gold standard. This allows the government to increase its financial aid to needy citizens. The national government in the UK, however, never undertook anything like President Roosevelt's New Deal here in the United States. It takes a lot of guts to do what Roosevelt did because he sort of cuts himself loose from any sort of ideological ties and says, we're going to be practical in our in addressing the Great Depression. We're going to try this. If it doesn't work, we'll try that. If something doesn't work, we'll admit it and move on to another solution. We don't see this sort of experimentation and willingness to abandon tradition in the UK. So unemployment continues to rise. Social public suffering continues to increase across Western Europe. Now, the Nazi Party itself, born of World War I, the Great War, slowly building its constituency and its membership through the 1920s. Hitler begins, I believe, essentially as an army agent investigating these right-wing parties in Munich. Hitler quickly abandons the army and joins the National Socialist Party. And then he rapidly becomes the leader of the party. Hitler shows a genius for propaganda and for public speaking, and rapidly takes over the leadership, gaining more and more members as we move through the 1920s. We'll talk about some of the leaders of Nazi Germany when we get to World War II. By 1930, the elections in Germany, the government increasingly is weakened as extremist parties build their strength. 1930 elections, the Nazi Party, Hitler's party, takes the second most number of seats in the Reichstag, the German parliament or representative body. By 1932, the Nazi Party became the single largest political party. German conservatives believe that they can have Hitler, the head of the Nazis, appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Hindenburg. Hindenburg, of course, a great hero of the Great War, General Hindenburg then. These German conservatives believe that they can appoint or have Hitler appointed the political leader of Germany and then control him, manipulate him, pressure him to keep him under control. Hitler is indeed appointed Chancellor of Germany. I believe it's in March of 33. Hindenburg dies in 1934, the next year. Upon Hindenburg's death, Hitler rapidly consolidates his power, and Germany rapidly becomes a totalitarian state. Those conservatives who believed that they could handle Hitler and control him were very badly mistaken. In France, at the same time, you have the rise of the Popular Front. The Popular Front is organized in 1936 by representatives of those leftist parties, the socialists, the liberals, the communists. It's formed to confront the rise of the fascist government in Italy, the Nazi government in Germany. The Popular Front's an attempt to heal political divisions, government aid to the needy, the defense of civil liberties, and the protection of social welfare. So you can see that Western Europe especially, is just in a stew here, just a boiling pot of chaos as these governments stagger through this continuing economic crisis. And of course, the economic crisis leads to social crisis, which leads to political crisis, which leads to questions of legitimacy of the social order. And you can see how the combination of these things is going to help contribute to not only to the rise of the Nazis, but to war in Europe. Let's try to draw some conclusions here about this Great Depression in Europe. It creates doubts about the market system, about capitalism. It appears that capitalism has crashed into the ditch and there's no way to get it out and back on the road running properly, especially when you look further east and see that the Soviet Union is essentially untouched by this crisis. Of course, the Soviets don't use a market economy. They have a centrally planned economy. So you see alternative systems which give people second thoughts here in the 30s as their social order begins to collapse. Prospects of revolution. We have nothing to lose at this point as unemployment increases and factories shut down and the social order begins to deteriorate. An overturning of the social order. It doesn't get any worse than that, does it? How much misery can a people endure? At what point do people take action? If your children are starving and you have no means of feeding them, do you let them starve or do you break in and steal a loaf of bread? So you can see how this economic crisis leads to profound doubt and difficulties throughout the social order. The Great Depression cast doubt on common verities, or those common ways of thinking and doing things. We haven't really seen anything of this magnitude in our lives. We did see the collapse in 2008 of the housing market, which had pretty dramatic ramifications across the economy. There are probably people watching this lecture now who well remember people who lost their homes, people who lost their businesses, people who lost their jobs, people who went through severe economic difficulty in the recession that began in 2008 with the collapse of the big investment banking firms, the automotive industries, AIG, the step-in of both the Bush and Obama administrations to try to prevent this catastrophe from getting even worse. That's the closest we've come to something like this in the 1930s. So I'm gonna stop there, and we'll pick this up again later. Thank you.